Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. And in this video we're going to be diving into a creative and artistic approach to landscape photography, which is intentional camera movement, also known as ICM. And for it I'm just using one fixed lens camera, and that is the Fujifilm X100V. Now I'm going to be honest, the idea to use a Fujifilm X100V for ICM photography had never actually really occurred to me. But what happened was a couple of nights ago I was actually on a campsite, and it was a chilled night, so I was just sitting around. It was a nice sort of sun setting, nice peaceful scene. I wasn't taking any proper photos, I was literally just having a bit of a chill. But there was basically a small meadow wildflowers right by me, and it made me think that perhaps it'd be nice to get a shot of it, but something a little bit more creative. And I literally just grabbed this camera, and obviously the shutter speeds weren't quite right, but then I remembered it has a built-in ND filter, so I put the ND filter on. So lo and behold, the shots you're seeing on the screen now were actually taken just using this one camera with fixed lens, built-in ND filters, nothing else. So really, this made me start to think even more, thinking perhaps this is a great little package for this kind of photography. It's small. I think the fixed lens in this case isn't too much of an issue, because I think I could learn to work around it. But of course that was a one-night shoot, so that one-night shoot doesn't mean this is a good solution for it. And of course the next problem is my level of experience, because if you watched last year's video where I basically went out sort of talking about my learning experience of doing ICM, well, that's the only time I've done it apart from the other night. So really today will be my third shoot of doing ICM. So full disclaimer, by no means am I an ICM photography expert. I must stress that whether you have an X100V or not, it's not actually going to really matter, because the only reason why I'm using this camera is because you've just got the built-in ND filter, but you could just screw on an ND filter and achieve exactly the same thing on pretty much any camera that you own. So really it's just about practicing these techniques and seeing what we can actually do with it. But before we can discuss how to do it, I think we need to discuss why we would want to do it. Now, first of all, you need to know exactly what ICM photography is. And ICM photography is intentional camera movement, and the clue is totally in the name. And basically, the crux of the idea is that whilst taking the photo, you actually move your camera. Now, you only move it slightly, because what you don't want to totally blur your photo, but you want to give an artistic blur, so that you're taking almost an artistic imprint of that subject. So for example, if I'm photographing these flowers, I wouldn't want a nice sharp shot of these flowers. I want a nice blurred shot, but sharp enough so you know what the flowers are, but blurred enough so it looks almost like a bit of a painting. So really, just to give a bit of a creative vision on it. Now, because of this very nature of lots of movement, what you generally find is you take a lot of shots to get one single keeper. But perhaps that's part of the charm. So in order to be able to move your camera enough, because really, let's face it, it's quite a bright day, so your shutter speed's going to be quite fast. And if you've got fast shutter speed, it's actually quite hard to get enough movement to blur it. So with this camera, what I've done, I've set the ISO to the base level, which is 160. I've then cranked the aperture up to f16. Now this will work on any camera, so basically any camera you're using, base ISO, aperture as high as it will go. And then the last thing I've done is actually, I've assigned this little button here to turn the ND filter on and off. So it's as simple as me pressing that to turn it off, and that to turn it on. So it's a really simple process. So the strength for this ND filter is 4 stops, which, whilst is really useful, I'm not 100% convinced it's actually going to be strong enough for sort of bright sunlight. So I think we're going to do a little bit of playing around with that to see if it does actually match up. In the past, I've used a 6-stop and a 10 times filter to actually try and block out a lot more light, so I can do a bit more creative on the movement. And ideally, I'm looking at trying to get at least a 15th of a second, perhaps a little bit longer, so I can sort of keep the blur going a bit more. But yeah, as I say, this is all a bit of an experiment, and it's all a bit of a learning curve, and we're going to go on that ride together. So let's test it out. Basically, I'm getting roughly a quarter of a second, which should be good. Now what I'm finding with flowers like this, and obviously I had a bit of experimenting the other day with it, was I tried to slowly tip the camera up like that. So effectively, I'll come over to show you, I'm sort of panning upwards. So I'm sort of rotating the camera almost from pointing down to pointing up. And I do it slowly, and in that moment of moving, I take my shot. So I'm going to adjust the different speeds of my hand. I'm not adjusting anything on the camera. Anyway, you get the idea. You do that lots and lots of times, and occasionally you get lucky and you get a shot like this. Well, I don't know if I'm 100% happy with that shot, to be honest. I'm not sure if the 4-stop built-in ND is just purely not strong enough. But I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head into the woodland, and we'll give it a try there. It might be a little bit darker as well, so that actually might help the process. And if it's still not strong enough, I think what I'll do is I'll actually put an external filter on. But yeah, I'm quite keen to see if I can get by with just using the internal ND, so I shall persevere a little bit longer. I'll see you at the woodland. Right, scratch that thought, because I've just noticed this tree here with some flowers on. It's got a nice structure about it, so I'm actually wondering if this could work quite nicely. So I think we'll give it a go. There's only one way to find out. Now I'm doing a different technique here, as you will see, and that is I'm slightly flicking. And I think it generally works. When you've got a nice big subject, flicking seems to work quite well. Yeah, cool. Now it's working. I might be flicking a little bit too fast actually. I'll flick a little slower. And that's the one thing I'm taking from this is you really have to gauge the speed of your movement. And I think if you've got a stronger ND on, you can sort of move backwards and forwards, so perhaps you sort of compensate, or you can hold it in place and sort of render more of a static image, as opposed to when your ND is a bit weaker, like I'm getting a 1/6 of a second. It's like, whilst it's doable, you have to really experiment with your actual physical movement. But yeah, you just have to play. And if you get lucky, you get a shot. Well, I still haven't got to the woodland, but I'm not complaining. I much prefer to have too much to photograph than not enough. I quite like the idea here of a really simple shot of just green and blue, essentially. So playing on the colours, there's a little bit of a track leading through, which I think would be quite nice. But I do think that a shutter speed of 15th of a second is not going to achieve what I want to achieve. However, I have an idea, and that is if I put the camera onto the control setting on the ISO, and then I can drop it down to an ISO of 80, so it's an expanded, that's 1/6 of a second. Now I know there may be a knock in the image quality. I don't actually, not really worried. It's never going to be technically really sharp, is it? Let's face it. So yeah, I think for this one I'm actually going to try just doing a slight pan, just to get that sort of sense of movement, but nothing too drastic. So really, it's all about trying to keep a little bit of the subject there. So again, I'm moving very slowly while taking it. I suppose in an ideal world, you'd be doing this sort of when the sun's lower, nice and warm. So you'd have slightly longer shutter speeds. But yeah, I think it's about keeping that continuous movement and pressing the button when you want, but keeping the movement going. I think I'm actually going to try just do one straight to the fields over here. So I'll spin you around so you can see what's going on. Because I'm not entirely 100% convinced that shot was working. So I'm going to go here quite fast. It's all about blur really on this one, so I don't want to keep anything pretty much sharp as such. I just want to get movement, almost like a sort of painterly effect. And in fact, I'm going to pan backwards and forwards. I'll tell you what, I won't keep on embarrassing myself on screen, I'll just embarrass myself in real life. So yeah, when I've got a shot I'm pleased with, I'll put it on now. Right, so I finally made it to the woodland, and now the shutter speeds are a lot more respectable for this kind of photography. Basically, I've dropped it back down to the standard base ISO 160. I'm still at f16. I've got the 4x ND on, and I'm getting 3 seconds basically, around about 3 seconds, which is pretty much perfect for what I want to do with this scene. So basically what I want to do is, with the trees you've just seen, I want to sort of get a streaky effect of the trees, but I also want to take enough of a sort of static shot, so to try and bring a bit of the texture out. So how I'm going to do that is basically I'm getting 3 seconds, and I'm basically going to take a 1 second shot and then move it. I'll demonstrate. So if we go 1 and now go up and down like that. So let's give him 1 second with 2 seconds movement, which is a bit too extreme. So I'm going to go for 2 seconds and then 1 second movement. 1, 2. And that's looking nice actually. I think I'm moving a little bit too fast. 1, 2. It's nice, but perhaps again still moving a bit too much. So I think I'm going to try this different. I'm going to move it down and then keep it in place. So I'm going to move it down for 1 second and stop. And that's it. That's definitely the sort of effect I'm looking at. I might do it the other way, then do up. Now, of course, when I'm holding that for 2 seconds, and that basically there's going to be quite a lot of move. Oh, but that's the one, I think. We'll do it again, but it's given a lovely. Yeah, it's a really nice feel to it. I'll carry on playing and I'll put my final favourite up on the screen for you now. I'm doing another twisting one here. It's quite hard to get the. It's going to be a really small amount of twist on it, I think. I might just try a bit of a flick. In fact, I'm actually just going to try doing that. Just a slight wiggle. It's like a Imagine you had a hula hoop around you and you were going like that with a camera in your hand. if that's the sort of thing you enjoy doing. I will agree that's probably some of the strangest advice anybody's ever given you on a YouTube photography channel. Gotta dance, doing the hula hoop. I'm only joking. Sometimes less movement is better than a lot of extreme movement. So you don't have to do the hula hoop dance if you really don't want to. But you're quite pleased about that, aren't you? I'll put my favourite shot up from those, and I think that's probably going to be the last shot of the day. But what I do want to talk about is you've probably noticed that every single shot has been in a square orientation. And this has been for a good reason. Basically, I find the 35mm lens potentially a little bit too wide for this sort of thing. But more importantly, I think, I find that putting this into a 1:1 aspect ratio on the crop reminds me of using a 6x6 medium format film camera with an 80mm lens. And I think that's what appeals to me the most, because it almost feels like I'm getting a film like shot out of the camera, a film like experience as such. I also tend to use the OVF on this camera. I want everything to be as film-like as possible on this camera. As such, I don't even process the RAW files. I do take RAW files, but I also shoot JPEGs at the same time. And what I've been doing is I've been going on the internet and getting different Fujifilm film recipes and preloading them in the camera. And all of today's shots have been taken using a Kodak Portra. I think it's Kodak Portra 400 film recipe, but it's Kodak Portra. And I like the look of it. I really do. I'm just going to try this one again. But what is the conclusion of using the Fujifilm X100 for ICM, intentional camera movement, landscape photography? And I think really, and this applies in so many different ways to this particular camera. The convenience of having a nice small camera like this, that I take this camera literally everywhere, that you can throw in your bag, and if the chance arises to take some shots you can, or if you want to get a bit creative you can. And to be honest, I don't even mind the fixed focal length, because it just makes me think more. And I've done videos about 35mm focal range before, so you know I really like 35mm anyway. So I don't actually have an issue with any of that. Is it the perfect all-in-one option? Probably not, perhaps. Is it the perfect camera for ICM? Well, I suppose it'd be nice to have a zoom so you can sort of experiment a little bit more, but then you're going to have to start putting filters on, which introduces that faff factor. And also your camera's going to be bigger, but I like the size of this and I've enjoyed using it for ICM. I'm not 100% convinced my photos are going to be that good today. I think the tree one, before the shot before this one, I think that one might be okay. But a quick recap, if you do want to try shooting ICM on your Fujifilm X100V or 6 or the F, basically all you need to do is put the base ISO, so ISO 160, swing your aperture around to f16, leave your shutter speed on automatic so that the camera decides, make sure your ND filter's switched on of course, and then really just play around and experiment. You don't have to do a square crop if you don't want to. I just like doing a square crop, but just have a play around experiment. Now, whilst I've suggested some angles that may work, to be honest, I'm learning, and I think this is all a bit of trial and error. I think the flicking one generally works quite well. If you've got a nice big scene, I think the flicking works quite well. If you've got something more intimate like flows, I find it up and down like that works nicely. But I think again, that will also work. I think it doesn't particularly matter. I think it's just a case of experimenting with your speeds. And when you start getting into the 1 second, 2 second, 3 second shutter speeds, try and give a point in that exposure where you just keep it static so you can sort of render it a bit better so it's not just all totally blurred. But above all, guys, just get out there and have some fun, and don't take it too seriously, because I don't think photography should be taken too seriously at times. I think just go and enjoy yourself. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you next week for another one. Thanks for watching.